Behind the golden gates of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of secrets sleep in marble corridors and velvet shadows, a single envelope would shatter everything the world believed about the British royal family. What started as a routine security check in Queen Camilla's private safe became the discovery that would rock the monarchy to its very foundation. When Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell received the call at 3:47 a.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, she had no idea she was about to uncover a truth so explosive that it would make headlines across every continent. The voice on the other end was shaking, a royal guard with 25 years of impeccable service, calling to report something that could destroy careers, end marriages, and rewrite royal history forever. Inside an ornate safe, hidden behind layers of security that protected the crown's most precious secrets, lay a handwritten letter that would reveal Princess Charlotte's true parentage, expose a decades-old conspiracy, and explain why a priceless tiara had been secretly moved in the dead of night. The letter, written in an elegant cursive on royal stationery, contained confessions that would make even the most seasoned royal correspondent's heart race. But this wasn't just any secret. This was the kind of truth that powerful people kill to protect, the kind of revelation that could topple governments and destroy lives. As Detective Inspector Mitchell would soon discover, some secrets are buried so deep that uncovering them puts everyone involved in mortal danger. The royal guard who made that fateful call, by morning, he would be missing. The letter? It would vanish as mysteriously as it appeared. And Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell, she would find herself caught in a web of lies, betrayal, and royal intrigue that stretched back generations, where every ally could be an enemy, and every truth could be a carefully crafted deception. Welcome to a story where crowns cast deadly shadows, where love letters become death warrants, and where the greatest treasure in the kingdom isn't made of gold, it's made of silence. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell had seen her share of unusual cases during her 15 years with the Metropolitan Police, but nothing had prepared her for the call that would change everything. The rain hammered against her apartment window as she fumbled for her phone at 3:47 a.m., her mind still foggy with sleep. "Detective Mitchell speaking," she mumbled, pushing her auburn hair away from her face. "Ma'am, this is Royal Protection Officer James Hartwell. I need to report something urgent." Something that could. The voice trailed off, and Sarah could hear the man's heavy breathing through the phone. "Officer Hartwell, take your time. What's happened?" "I found something in Queen Camilla's private safe. Something that shouldn't exist. A letter from Princess Charlotte, but not the Charlotte we know today. This letter is dated 15 years ago, when she was just a child, and it reveals..." His voice cracked. "Detective, I think I've uncovered something that could destroy the royal family." Sarah sat up in bed, immediately alert. Royal protection officers were trained professionals who didn't panic easily. If Hartwell was calling at this hour, shaking like a leaf, then whatever he discovered was monumentally significant. "Where are you now, Officer Hartwell?" "I'm in the Queen's private study at Clarence House. I was conducting a routine security sweep when I noticed the safe was slightly ajar. Protocol required me to secure it, but when I opened it fully..." He paused, and Sarah could hear papers rustling. "There's a letter here written in a child's handwriting, but the contents are impossible. It talks about secrets, about her real father, about why she's been told to stay quiet about what she remembers from when she was very young." Sarah's mind raced. Princess Charlotte was currently 11 years old, a bright and beloved member of the royal family. If there was a letter dated 15 years ago, it would mean this was written by a completely different Charlotte, perhaps someone who had been erased from royal history. "Officer Hartwell, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't touch anything else, don't speak to anyone, and don't let anyone into that room. I'm on my way." "Detective, there's something else. The letter mentions a tiara, the lotus flower tiara. It says the tiara was given to her real mother as a promise, but when her mother died under suspicious circumstances, the truth about Charlotte's parentage had to be hidden. The letter talks about being adopted by the royal family to keep the secret buried." Sarah's blood ran cold. The lotus flower tiara was one of the most valuable pieces in the royal collection, worth millions of pounds and steeped in centuries of history. If there was a connection between this mysterious letter and such a significant piece of royal jewelry, the implications were staggering. She threw on her clothes and raced through the empty London streets, her mind churning with possibilities. Royal scandals were nothing new. The family had weathered affairs, divorces, and public embarrassments before. But if this letter suggested that Princess Charlotte wasn't who everyone believed her to be, it would be the biggest constitutional crisis in modern British history. Clarence House loomed before her in the pre-dawn darkness, its elegant Georgian facade hiding centuries of secrets. The royal protection officers at the gate recognized her immediately. Sarah had worked on several high-profile cases involving the royal family and had earned their respect for her discretion and professionalism. "Where's Officer Hartwell?" she asked as she was escorted through the ornate corridors lined with priceless paintings and antique furniture. "In the Queen's study, ma'am. He's been waiting for you and hasn't moved from his position." The Queen's private study was a sanctuary of rich mahogany, leather-bound books, and family photographs. Officer Hartwell stood near an ornate wall safe, his face pale and drawn. He was a man in his early 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, known among his colleagues for his unshakable calm. To see him so visibly shaken was deeply unsettling. "Show me," Sarah said simply. Hartwell handed her a piece of cream-colored paper with the royal watermark. The handwriting was clearly that of a child, with carefully formed letters and slight spelling mistakes. But the content made Sarah's heart race. "Dear Diary, today Mama told me the real truth before she got too sick to talk. She said I'm not really Prince William's daughter like everyone thinks. She said my real daddy was someone very important who couldn't marry her because he was already married to someone else. Mama said that's why I have different eyes than Papa William and why I remember things from before I came to live here. She gave me the beautiful tiara and said it was proof of who my real family is. She made me promise to keep it safe and to remember that someday the truth would have to come out. I'm scared about what will happen when people find out, but Mama said the tiara will protect the truth until it's safe to tell everyone. I love my new family, but I miss my real mama so much. Charlotte Elizabeth." Sarah read the letter 3 times, each reading making the implications clearer and more terrifying. If this letter was genuine, it suggested that the current Princess Charlotte, the daughter of Prince William and Catherine, was not the first royal child to bear that name. It suggested that there had been another Charlotte, an adopted child who had died or disappeared, and whose story had been completely erased from royal history. "Officer Hartwell, when exactly did you find this?" "About an hour ago, ma'am. I was doing the midnight security check when I noticed the safe door wasn't properly closed. When I went to secure it, this letter was sitting right on top of everything else, almost as if someone had placed it there recently. As if someone wanted it to be found," Sarah murmured, studying the letter more carefully. The paper was aged, but not 15 years old. The ink seemed fresh, and there were no signs of long-term storage. Someone had either recently created this letter or had kept it hidden for years and chose this moment to reveal it. What else was in the safe? The usual items, important documents, some jewelry, family photographs. But there was also this. Hartwell showed her a small, leather-bound diary. It appears to be written by the same child, documenting her life in the royal household. According to the entries, she lived here for about 2 years before the entries just stopped. Sarah opened the diary carefully. The entries painted a picture of a confused and lonely child who had been brought into the royal family under mysterious circumstances. The early entries spoke of missing her real mama and feeling different from her new siblings. Later entries became increasingly worried about her mother's declining health and contained references to secrets that must never be told. The final entry was dated just 2 days before the last entry, and it was heartbreaking. "Mama died today. The nice doctor said it was her heart, but I heard the grown-ups talking. They said she knew too much and that some secrets are too dangerous to keep. I'm scared they're going to send me away now. I hid the tiara where Mama told me to, and I wrote down everything she told me about my real daddy. If something happens to me, maybe someone will find this and know the truth. Officer Hartwell, I need you to think very carefully. Who has access to this safe? Only Queen Camilla and her most senior staff. The safe contains highly sensitive personal documents and is checked only during scheduled security sweeps. The last official opening was 3 months ago during a routine inspection. Sarah's mind was racing through the possibilities. Someone with intimate access to the Queen's private quarters had placed these documents where they would eventually be discovered. This wasn't a random revelation. It was a carefully orchestrated disclosure. But who would want to expose such an explosive secret? And why now? We need to examine the lotus flower tiara immediately. If this letter is authentic, the tiara might contain evidence or documentation that could verify these claims. Hartwell nodded grimly. The tiara is kept in the Tower of London with the other crown jewels, but there are detailed records of its history and previous owners. If there's any truth to this story, those records might have been altered or hidden. As they prepared to leave Clarence House, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ancient building seemed to hold its breath around them, as if the very walls were keeping secrets. She tucked the letter and diary into an evidence bag, knowing that these documents could either expose the greatest royal scandal in history or destroy the lives of innocent people caught in a web of lies. The drive to New Scotland Yard was tense and silent. Sarah's phone rang twice, but she let go to voicemail. Whatever political pressure was about to descend upon this investigation, she needed time to understand what they were really dealing with. At the station, Sarah immediately began cross-referencing historical records of the royal family. What she found was troubling. There were gaps in the official records from 15 years ago, periods where normally meticulous royal documentation seemed incomplete or missing entirely. Birth records, staff assignments, and even official photographs from that period showed inconsistencies that suggested significant events had been deliberately obscured. The most shocking discovery came when Sarah accessed medical records through a confidential royal database. There had indeed been a child named Charlotte Elizabeth who had lived briefly with the royal family 15 years ago. According to the encrypted files, she had been the daughter of a woman named Elizabeth Harrington, who had died of an apparent heart attack while under royal protection. Elizabeth Harrington's file made for fascinating reading. She had been a young woman from a modest background who had somehow gained access to the highest levels of British society. Her death had been sudden and unexpected, and the investigation had been handled internally by royal security rather than the regular police. Most intriguingly, her daughter had disappeared from all records immediately after the funeral. Sarah's blood chilled as she realized the implications. If these documents were authentic, then 15 years ago, a young woman had died under suspicious circumstances, her child had vanished from royal protection, and the entire incident had been covered up so thoroughly that it existed only in the deepest, most classified royal archives. But if that child had died or been sent away 15 years ago, then who had written the letter that Officer Hartwell had found? Someone knew the truth about what had happened to Elizabeth Harrington and her daughter, and they had chosen this moment to bring that truth into the light. Sarah's investigation was just beginning, but already she could feel the weight of forces aligning against her. By morning, she suspected there would be phone calls from very powerful people demanding that this investigation be closed quietly and permanently. The question was whether she would have enough time to uncover the real truth before those forces succeeded in burying it once again. As dawn broke over London, Sarah Mitchell found herself standing at the center of a mystery that could reshape the British monarchy forever. The letter in her evidence bag felt like a ticking time bomb, and she had the growing certainty that powerful people would do anything to prevent its secrets from seeing the light of day. The game had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Sarah Mitchell's phone started ringing at 6:30 a.m., barely 3 hours after she had left Clarence's house with a mysterious letter and diary. The first call came from Deputy Commissioner Harrison, the second from the private secretary to the royal household, and the third from a number she didn't recognize but suspected belonged to MI5. She ignored them all. Instead, she drove directly to the Tower of London, where the crown jewels were housed under some of the most sophisticated security in the world. If the lotus flower tiara held the key to understanding the truth about Elizabeth Harrington and her daughter Charlotte, Sarah needed to examine it before the investigation was shut down by forces beyond her control. Dr. Margaret Thornberry, the chief curator of the crown jewels, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who had spent her entire career studying royal artifacts. She met Sarah at the heavily guarded entrance to the jewel house, her expression curious but cautious. "Detective Inspector Mitchell, I understand you need to examine the lotus flower tiara in connection with an ongoing investigation. Might I ask what this concerns?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss the details, Dr. Thornberry, but I need to know everything about the tiara's history, particularly any changes in ownership or documentation over the past 20 years. Dr. Thornberry led Sarah through multiple layers of security into the climate-controlled vault where the crown jewels were stored. The lotus flower tiara sat in its own illuminated case, a breathtaking piece of craftsmanship featuring hundreds of diamonds arranged in an intricate floral pattern. Even in the sterile environment of the vault, it seemed to glow with an inner light. The lotus flower tiara has an interesting history, Dr. Thornberry began, pulling up detailed records on her computer. It was created in 1887 for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee and has traditionally been worn by royal women during significant state occasions. However, she paused, scrolling through the digital files. "This is odd. There's a gap in the documentation from about 15 years ago." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What kind of gap?" "According to the official records, the tiara was removed from the collection for conservation and cleaning and was returned 6 months later. But there are no detailed conservation reports, no photographs of the work done, and no invoices from the usual restoration specialist the royal family employs." "Could it have been given to someone during that period?" "Theoretically, yes. Royal jewelry is sometimes lent for special occasions or given as gifts, but such transactions are meticulously documented. This appears to be an unofficial removal, which is highly unusual." Dr. Thornberry accessed deeper archives, her frown deepening as she scrolled through historical records. "Detective, there's something else. The tiara that's currently in our collection appears to be a perfect replica. The weight is correct, the dimensions match, and the craftsmanship is flawless, but the serial numbers etched into the gold don't match the original documentation." Sarah felt her heart racing. "You're saying the original lotus flower tiara was replaced with a fake? A perfect reproduction, but yes, someone went to extraordinary lengths and expense to create this replica. The diamonds alone would be worth millions, and the craftsmanship required would take master jewelers months to complete." "When did you discover this?" "I didn't until just now. The differences are so subtle that they would only be detected during a detailed forensic examination. Whoever orchestrated this switch wanted to ensure that the theft would never be discovered during routine inspections." Sarah's mind was reeling. The letter had mentioned that Charlotte's mother had given her the tiara as proof of her real parentage. If the original tiara had been replaced with a replica 15 years ago, it meant that Elizabeth Harrington had indeed been given one of the royal family's most precious artifacts, something that would only happen if her relationship with a senior royal family member was far more significant than anyone had realized. "Dr. Thornberry, I need you to conduct a full forensic analysis of this replica. I need to know everything: when it was made, who might have crafted it, any microscopic evidence that might tell us about its origins." "Of course, but detective, this kind of analysis will take several days, and given the high-profile nature of the crown jewels, I'll need authorization from the highest levels of the royal household." Sarah's phone buzzed with yet another call from Deputy Commissioner Harrison. The political pressure was mounting, and she suspected she had very little time before the investigation was taken away from her entirely. "Do what you can, doctor. I'll handle the authorization." Sarah left the Tower of London with more questions and answers, but the pattern was becoming clearer. Someone had given Elizabeth Harrington the original lotus flower tiara as proof of a relationship that was so sensitive it required the most elaborate cover-up. When Elizabeth had died under suspicious circumstances, the tiara had been recovered and replaced with a perfect replica to hide the fact that it had ever been missing. Her next stop was St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where she hoped to find Dr. James Crawford, the physician who had signed Elizabeth Harrington's death certificate. According to the files Sarah had accessed, Dr. Crawford had been the royal family's personal physician for over 20 years and would have been the natural choice to handle any medical emergency involving someone under royal protection. Dr. Crawford was now retired, but Sarah tracked him to his private practice in Harley Street. He was a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to weigh her carefully as she introduced herself. "Dr. Crawford, I'm investigating some irregularities in historical medical records, and I need to ask you about a patient you treated 15 years ago, Elizabeth Harrington." The change in Dr. Crawford's demeanor was immediate and telling. His face went pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup. "Detective, I'm not sure I understand. Patient confidentiality extends beyond death, and I'm not at liberty to discuss specific cases without proper authorization." "Dr. Crawford, this is a criminal investigation that could have implications for national security. I need to know the real circumstances of Elizabeth Harrington's death." Dr. Crawford was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the busy London street below. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Elizabeth Harrington was one of the most tragic cases of my career. She was a vibrant young woman who should have had decades ahead of her, but she became entangled in circumstances far beyond her control." "What were the real circumstances of her death?" "Officially, she died of cardiac arrest brought on by a rare genetic condition. Unofficially," he paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Detective, there are some secrets that powerful people will kill to protect. Elizabeth knew something that made her incredibly dangerous to very important individuals." Sarah leaned forward. "Are you saying she was murdered?" "I'm saying that her death was convenient for certain parties, and that my examination of her body raised questions that I was strongly discouraged from pursuing. There were inconsistencies in her condition that suggested the involvement of certain pharmaceutical substances, but when I raised these concerns, I was visited by individuals who made it clear that my career and my family's safety depended on my cooperation with the official narrative." "What about her daughter? What happened to Charlotte?" Dr. Crawford's expression became even more troubled. "The child was removed from royal protection immediately after the funeral. I was told she was being relocated for her own safety, but..." He shook his head. "Detective, I've carried the guilt of that case for 15 years. Whatever happened to that little girl, it wasn't what was best for her. It was what was necessary to protect the reputation and interests of people who considered themselves above the law." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you have any idea who might have been responsible? Who had the power to orchestrate such a comprehensive cover-up?" "Detective, the individuals involved in this matter have the resources of the British government and the royal household at their disposal. They can make people disappear, alter official records, and silence anyone who becomes inconvenient. If you're investigating this case, you need to understand that you're not just challenging criminals. You're challenging the most powerful institution in British society." As Sarah left Dr. Crawford's office, her phone rang again. This time it was Officer Hartwell, and his voice was tight with panic. "Detective Mitchell, you need to know, I've been suspended from duty pending an internal investigation. They're saying I violated security protocols by removing documents from the Queen's safe without proper authorization." "Officer Hartwell, where are you now?" "I'm at home, but, Detective, there's something else. I received a call this morning from someone claiming to represent the interests of the royal family. They offered me a substantial sum of money to recant my statement about finding the letter and diary. When I refused, they suggested that my family's welfare depended on my cooperation. Sarah's blood ran cold. The cover-up machine was already in motion, applying pressure at every level to ensure that the truth about Elizabeth Harrington and her daughter remained buried. Officer Hartwell, I need you to stay home and avoid contact with anyone until I can arrange protection for you and your family. This investigation has become extremely dangerous. Sarah's final stop of the day was the British National Archives, where birth and death records were stored in comprehensive detail. She needed to verify the official records regarding Elizabeth Harrington's death and find any trace of what had happened to her daughter. The archivist, a helpful young man named David Chun, was eager to assist with her research. But when Sarah provided the details of the case she was investigating, David's expression changed. "Detective, I'm sorry, but the records you're requesting have been classified under the Official Secrets Act. Access requires authorization from the Cabinet Office and approval from at least 3 senior government ministers." When were these records classified? David checked his computer. According to the system, the classification was applied this morning at 8:47 a.m. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Someone with extraordinary government access had been monitoring her investigation in real time and had moved preemptively to block her access to critical evidence. The cover-up wasn't 15 years old. It was actively being maintained and reinforced by people who were watching her every move. As Sarah walked back to her car through the bustling streets of London, she realized that she was caught in a web far more complex and dangerous than she had initially understood. The letter found in Queen Camilla's safe wasn't just a historical revelation. It was a direct challenge to a conspiracy that involved the highest levels of government and the royal family. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Detective Mitchell, some investigations are too dangerous to pursue. Consider your family's welfare before you proceed further. This is your only warning." Sarah deleted the message, but the chill it sent through her was unmistakable. She was no longer just investigating a historical mystery. She was actively threatening powerful people who had proven they would go to any length to protect their secrets. But as she thought about the tragic story of Elizabeth Harrington and her daughter Charlotte, Sarah knew she couldn't stop now. Somewhere out there, the truth about what had happened 15 years ago was waiting to be uncovered. The question was whether she could find it before the forces arrayed against her succeeded in silencing her permanently. The investigation was far from over, and Sarah Mitchell was beginning to understand that the real battle was just beginning. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell knew she was running out of time. 3 days had passed since she had discovered the letter in Queen Camilla's safe, and the pressure to abandon the investigation was mounting from every direction. Deputy Commissioner Harrison had called her into his office twice. MI5 had requested all her files, and she had been followed home each night by unmarked cars with government plates. But Sarah had one advantage that her opponents didn't know about. She had made copies of everything before the political machinery could shut her down. The letter, the diary, the medical records, and Dr. Thornberry's preliminary analysis of the replica Tiara were all stored in a secure location, along with a detailed report she had prepared documenting every aspect of her investigation. On Thursday morning, Sarah received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. "Detective Mitchell, my name is Margaret Whitfield. I believe you've been investigating the death of Elizabeth Harrington." Sarah's pulse quickened. The voice belonged to an elderly woman with a refined accent, and there was something in her tone that suggested she had been waiting years to make this call. "Who is this, please? How did you get my number?" "I was Elizabeth Harrington's aunt, Detective. I'm 83 years old, and I've been carrying a terrible secret for 15 years. When I heard through certain channels that someone was finally investigating Elizabeth's death, I knew I had to speak up before it's too late." Sarah arranged to meet Margaret Whitfield at her home in Surrey, a modest cottage surrounded by beautiful gardens that spoke of a lifetime of careful tending. Margaret was a small, dignified woman with silver hair and eyes that held both sadness and determination. "Detective, before I tell you what I know, you must understand that speaking to you puts my life in danger. The people responsible for my niece's death have unlimited resources and have proven they will eliminate anyone who threatens their secret. Mrs. Whitfield, I can arrange protection for you if necessary. What do you know about Elizabeth's death? Margaret led Sarah into a sitting room filled with photographs and mementos from a long life. On the mantelpiece sat a framed picture of a beautiful young woman holding a small child, Elizabeth and Charlotte Harrington. Elizabeth was my brother's daughter, a bright and lovely girl who worked as a translator for the Foreign Office. Her linguistic skills were exceptional, and she was often assigned to handle confidential communications for high-level diplomatic meetings. 15 years ago, she was assigned to provide translation services for a series of private meetings involving senior members of the royal family. Sarah pulled out her notebook, sensing that she was finally about to learn the truth. During one of these assignments, Elizabeth met Prince Andrew. Their relationship began as a professional collaboration, but it quickly became personal. Elizabeth was dazzled by the attention of a royal prince, and Andrew was charmed by her intelligence and beauty. Sarah's mind raced. Prince Andrew's involvement would explain the extraordinary lengths taken to cover up the scandal. As the Queen's second son and a senior royal, any illegitimate relationship would have massive constitutional implications. Elizabeth became pregnant, and Andrew promised to take care of her and the child. He gave her the lotus flower tiara as a symbol of his commitment and as proof that he acknowledged Charlotte as his daughter. For a brief time, Elizabeth believed that Andrew would find a way to legitimize their relationship. But that didn't happen. Margaret's expression darkened. Andrew was already embroiled in other scandals, and his advisors made it clear that acknowledging another illegitimate child would be catastrophic for the royal family's reputation. Elizabeth was told that she and Charlotte would be provided for financially, but that the relationship must remain absolutely secret. What changed? Why was Elizabeth killed? Elizabeth discovered something that made her too dangerous to live. While working on translation projects, she had access to highly classified communications between the royal household and government officials. She learned that Prince Andrew was involved in financial transactions that were not just scandalous, but potentially treasonous. Margaret walked to an antique secretary desk and withdrew a manila envelope that looked as if it had been hidden for years. Elizabeth gave me these documents shortly before her death. She was terrified and said that if anything happened to her, I should make sure the truth eventually came to light. The envelope contained photocopies of financial records, bank statements, and correspondence that painted a picture of Prince Andrew's involvement in questionable business dealings with foreign entities. The documents suggested that Andrew had used his royal position to facilitate transactions that compromised British national security interests. Elizabeth threatened to expose these activities unless Andrew acknowledged Charlotte and provided properly for their daughter's future. She believed that her knowledge of his financial improprieties gave her leverage to force his hand. Instead, it got her killed. Elizabeth died 3 days after she confronted Andrew with these documents. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but Elizabeth was a healthy 28-year-old woman with no history of heart problems. More importantly, she had told me that she felt she was being watched and that she suspected someone was tampering with her food and drinks. Sarah studied the financial documents, recognizing that they represented evidence of criminal activity that could destroy not just Prince Andrew, but potentially bring down the entire royal family. What happened to Charlotte after Elizabeth's death? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. That's the most heartbreaking part of this story, Detective. Charlotte didn't die 15 years ago, as the official records suggest. She was adopted by a middle-class family and given a new identity for her protection. The royal family couldn't risk having Andrew's illegitimate daughter living where she might eventually learn the truth about her parentage and her mother's death. She's still alive? Very much so. She's 26 years old now, living in Edinburgh under the name Claire Harrison. She works as a museum curator and has no idea that Prince Andrew is her biological father or that her mother was murdered to protect royal secrets. Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with dread. If Charlotte, now Claire, was alive, she was both the key to proving everything and a target for people who had already committed murder to protect their secrets. Mrs. Whitfield, why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you come forward years ago? I was terrified, detective. After Elizabeth's death, I received visits from people who made it very clear that my safety and the safety of other family members depended on my silence. But I'm an old woman now, and I've carried this guilt for too long. When I learned that someone was finally investigating, I knew it was time to tell the truth. Margaret handed Sarah another envelope. These are all the documents Elizabeth gave me, along with detailed notes about her relationship with Prince Andrew and her discoveries about his financial activities. There are also photographs of Andrew and Elizabeth together, and a DNA sample that Elizabeth saved from Charlotte's baby teeth. Sarah realized she now possessed evidence that could prove Prince Andrew was Charlotte's father and potentially expose criminal activities that had led to murder. But she also understood that possessing this evidence put her in mortal danger. Mrs. Whitfield, I need to ask you to come with me immediately. We need to get you into protective custody before anyone discovers that you've spoken to me. Detective, I'm not going anywhere. I'm too old to spend my remaining years hiding from the truth. But you need to be very careful. The people responsible for Elizabeth's death have been monitoring this investigation from the beginning. They know about your visits to Dr. Crawford and Dr. Thornberry, and they certainly know that you're getting close to the truth. As if to emphasize Margaret's warning, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Deputy Commissioner Harrison. Mitchell, where are you? You missed your meeting with the MI5 liaison, and there are some very unhappy people who want to speak with you immediately. Sir, I'm following up on some leads in the Harrington case. The Harrington case has been closed, detective. By order of the Home Secretary, all materials related to that investigation are to be turned over to MI5 immediately. You're to report to headquarters within the hour. Sarah ended the call and turned to Margaret. They're shutting down the investigation. I need to get this evidence to someone who can protect it and ensure the truth comes out. Detective, there's one more thing you need to know. The letter that was found in Queen Camilla's safe. Elizabeth wrote that letter, but not 15 years ago. She wrote it just before her death as insurance, hoping that someday it would be found and would lead someone to uncover the truth. But how did it end up in the Queen's safe? Elizabeth had a friend inside the royal household, someone who promised to ensure the letter would eventually surface when the time was right. I believe that person has been waiting all these years for the opportunity to expose what really happened. Sarah's mind was racing. Someone inside the royal household had been maintaining this secret for 15 years, waiting for the right moment to trigger an investigation that would expose the truth about Elizabeth Harrington's murder and Prince Andrew's involvement. Mrs. Whitfield, I need you to give me Claire Harrison's address in Edinburgh. If this investigation is about to be shut down, she needs to know the truth about her mother and her real identity before it's too late. Margaret wrote down the address with shaking hands. Detective, please be careful. These people have killed before, and they won't hesitate to kill again to protect their secrets. Sarah left Margaret Whitfield's cottage with enough evidence to expose one of the biggest royal scandals in British history. But she knew she had very little time before the investigation was terminated and the evidence was confiscated. Her phone was buzzing constantly with calls from her superiors, and she could see unmarked cars positioning themselves around Margaret's neighborhood. As she drove toward Edinburgh, Sarah called the one journalist she trusted completely, Rebecca Matthews from The Guardian, a woman who had built her career exposing government corruption and who had the resources and courage to handle a story of this magnitude. Rebecca, I have the story of the century, but I need your help to make sure it sees the light of day. Can you meet me in Edinburgh tonight? Sarah, what are you involved in? There are rumors that MI5 is looking for you, and your department has issued a statement that you're no longer assigned to active cases. Rebecca, 15 years ago, Prince Andrew had an affair with a translator named Elizabeth Harrington. She bore his child, and when she threatened to expose his criminal financial activities, she was murdered. The child is still alive, living under a false identity, and I have the evidence to prove everything. The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds. Sarah, if what you're saying is true, this story will destroy the royal family and potentially bring down the government. Are you absolutely certain about your evidence? I have documents, photographs, financial records, and DNA evidence. I also have the original letter that triggered this investigation and testimony from Elizabeth's aunt who has been hiding the truth for 15 years. Then, we need to move fast. If MI5 is involved, you don't have long before they shut this down permanently. I'll meet you in Edinburgh in 3 hours. As Sarah drove through the Scottish countryside toward Edinburgh, she reflected on how a routine call about a letter in a royal safe had led to the discovery of murder, conspiracy, and financial crimes at the highest levels of British society. The truth about Elizabeth Harrington and her daughter Charlotte was finally about to emerge from 15 years of carefully maintained silence. But Sarah also knew that powerful people would do anything to prevent this story from becoming public. The race to expose the truth had begun, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of the British royal family, but the life and death of everyone who had dared to challenge one of the most dangerous secrets in modern British history. The truth was finally within reach, but the most dangerous part of Sarah Mitchell's investigation was just beginning.